Thank you. Today on Humans of Cyber, we welcome Detective Constable Kenrick Bagnall. Kenrick is a cybercrime investigator with the Coordinated Cyber Center of Intelligence Services with the Toronto Police Service. In his 15-year career, Kenrick has worked in primary response, community response, and criminal and divisional fraud investigations, in addition to his 6 years in the cybercrime unit. Prior to joining TPS in 2006, Kenrick spent a number of years in the IT industry, primarily in the financial services sector, where he has held the positions of Senior Network Analyst, Information Technology Manager, and Senior Vice President of Information Technology. Kenrick is an associate professor at George Brown College in Toronto, where he designed and instructs the Cybersecurity Fundamentals and Cyber Incident Response and Recovery courses. He also lectures at the University of Toronto Global Professional Masters of Law, Innovation, Law, and Technology program. Kenrick is a highly sought-after speaker, a widely published writer, and an experienced cybercrime investigator. We are very fortunate to have him join us today. Welcome, Kenrick.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. Happy to be here.
To get right into it, after a long and distinguished career in more traditional IT roles, what made you decide to join police services, Kenrick?
Yeah, that's the kind of the $1 million question. I get asked that one often. People kind of see a big stretch between working in information technology and then going to law enforcement. And to be honest, I didn't really see the connection at first after spending the larger part of my career actually working outside of Canada, based in Bermuda. I returned to Toronto in 2005 and started doing some consulting work. The market, such that it was at the time, was kind of quote unquote soft. Things weren't too busy, and there weren't a lot of opportunities at the level I left Bermuda. When I was working in Bermuda, and I went there originally as a senior network analyst, and then worked as an IT manager for another company, and then ended up running the IT department for a small offshore bank. So there weren't a lot of opportunities that were quite that fit when I returned to Toronto. The big game changer was when a good friend who is now a superintendent with the Toronto Police Service kept encouraging me to apply. His vision was that with my background experience, that the agency could use someone with my skill sets. And at the time, there was no cybercrime unit within the agency. Cybercrime was happening as a category of criminality for sure, but there was no specialized unit for it. The thought at the time was that I'd probably use my skill sets within the tech crime section, which is the area that focuses on physical forensics, preparing digital evidence for court and things like that. I did have a look at that after becoming a sworn officer in 2006, but it wasn't really the type of work that appealed to me. It's important work, but after what I had done before, I think I needed something a little bit different. So I figured at the time, well, I'm a police officer, I might as well learn the job. So I took every investigative opportunity and course and training that I could get my hands on. And then in 2013, the agency started a project to try and figure out what they needed in terms of putting together a specialized unit for cybercrime, in terms of the mission, the mandate, roles, responsibilities, the skill sets, etc. The unit spun up in 2014. I put an application in to transfer there, and I transferred there in February of 2015. And I guess the rest, as they say, is history. But that's I guess the short version of how I transitioned from working in the information technology space and now becoming not just a police officer, but one that focuses on cybercrime investigations.
Okay, no, great. So you really have been in with the program almost since inception.
Pretty much. The unit started with 4 officers, and I was, I think, number 6. We're up to 22 sworn officers now in 3 different sections, and we have 5 civilians who support the team in terms of roles of, administrative roles and research roles and crime analysis and things like that. Our civilian members are a invaluable asset. Like, we just could not do our jobs without them, and they contribute in a very large capacity to the work that that we do.
Okay. Right. No, thanks. In addition to that already busy schedule, I read the other day that you're a board member with Hackers for Change. Could you tell us a bit about the work that they do and how you're involved?
Yeah, Hackers for Change is a really cool type of organization. It was founded by an incredibly bright young man who sort of saw the need for providing information technology or information security services for nonprofits. Now, nonprofits generally are the custodians of pretty valuable personal information and financial information in terms of donations and sponsorships and different things like that. Yet, being a nonprofit, they don't necessarily have the means, the financial means to implement a lot of really high caliber information and cybersecurity infrastructure, resources, training, doing pen testing, and all this other stuff that's part of it. So he decided to put a group together where basically the structure is we would get it's all volunteer, first of all, 100% volunteer, and it is a charity, a nonprofit itself, working for charities and nonprofits. But we would get senior security engineers to volunteer, and under each one we would place juniors, 3 to 5, depending on the engagement, and they would go out and perform information security, pen testing type services for nonprofits to help them keep them secure, and the data that they are custodians of. Now there's some win-wins here, because a lot of the juniors that we bring on board are people who are either just out of their formal education and don't necessarily have a load of hands-on experience. So working with Hackers for Change gives them the opportunity to actually engage in real life work projects, and now have something more tangible for their resume in terms of work experience, which is
So a mentorship program almost.
100%, 100%. So there's the education piece in terms of some work we're planning on doing with some online resources for training, and also a cyber camp that we're putting together for more training, targeting younger people. I think one of the motivations for me, really, in terms of getting involved, and when I was asked to get involved, it was a no-brainer. I thought there were so many good things that the group was doing. But I think one of the big things for me is that if you go back, 15 or 16 years, and someone's saying, "Hey, you should be a police officer, you'd be a police officer," and I'm thinking over here with my technology brain, I don't want to be a police officer. This is what I do. I think that there's probably a lot of people who don't see that nexus. They don't see that connection between information security and working in law enforcement. Because there's the lack of awareness that cybercrime as a criminality, something that law enforcement is involved with, and we investigate the matters, and we work with individuals and organizations, and that's something I definitely want to promote, is not just the professional opportunities within the space, and mentor young people, and even older professionals who are maybe looking to change or advance their careers. That there are these opportunities out there, and trying to give back. I mean, I've been really fortunate in my career to have some pretty good mentors and leadership role models, and I'm just trying to reach back and try to do the same for what's been done for me in the past.
Right. No, that's terrific. Now, you mentioned a little bit about the constitution of the Coordinated Cyber Center, and how many personnel there are, and civilians as well. What does a typical day, if there is such a thing, look like at this degree?
Yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head there, David. If there's such a thing, it doesn't. There's really, and I think that's probably true for law enforcement in general. Even when I was a uniformed officer doing primary response and some of the other roles in a uniform capacity, there really is no typical day. Even if the typical day in uniform was a detail to provide some sort of visible police presence, or security and public safety at a public event or a parade or something like that. That's coming. That work is coming, but there's still potential variables in there that could completely change your day. Now, certainly working within cyber, there's things that are trending in terms of what the threat landscape looks like these days, and a lot of it has been impacted by what we've all been going through for the last year with COVID-19. But there really is no typical day, because you could be working away on one particular case or a couple of cases, and then all of a sudden a major incident happens, and you're forced to respond. One of the things that we do is that we do also support the field, and what I mean by that is when the unit first started about 6 or 7 years ago, one of the main things that we did was we supported the investigators out in the field, the divisional investigators working in a criminal investigations bureau or a major crime unit, because there's really two aspects to investigating cybercrime. There's the technology as a tool aspect, as we call it, where the technology was used to facilitate a mainstream criminal code offense. For example, where perhaps a mobile phone or a computer or a social media account was used in the committal of a criminal harassment, or to do some surveillance on a particular potential victim for a robbery or something like that. That's what we consider technology as a tool. But the other side of the coin is technology as a target, where the technology is actually the target of the offense, the actual data, or traditionally considered to be a hack or a data breach. We're reading about it almost weekly in the paper, where company X, lost, X number of thousands of customer records, and or ransomware or business email compromise, of these types of things. So in the beginning, in the inception of the Toronto Police Cybercrime Unit, that's what we did. We helped support all of the investigators out there doing great work, where a case would come in, but because of the technology that's involved, they may not have the bandwidth or experience to be able to carry it out. So we would support that. We'd also support, what we call emergency disclosure requests, or exigent requests. What we would do, we would support, for example, let's say something like a vulnerable missing youth or child, where we don't have much. We know that the child may be diabetic, or there may be some other physical or mental health dependencies. And all we may have is perhaps a social media account for the child, or maybe we have a username or a moniker for a gaming platform, because we know the child enjoyed playing video games. So we would get involved to use those little artifacts that we have, those little nuggets that we have, to participate in an investigation to quickly try and find this at-risk missing or otherwise vulnerable person. So to answer the original question, there's really no typical day. We could spend days or weeks working on our caseload, when out of the blue, something major would happen. Just a couple of weeks ago, there was a major compromise at a water treatment facility in Florida, right? That kind of came out of the blue and made a lot of news. But certainly, when it comes to threats to critical infrastructure, that could certainly happen within our municipality. So we would obviously have to react to that with our provincial partners, and conduct some sort of an investigation with a view to attribution. Our goal is always to attribute the attack, or attribute the cause of the source, and put someone behind the keyboard at the end of the day. Those who are the victims, it's more on the remediation side, in terms of, okay, well, how did they get in? How can we stop them from getting in? Are they still in our systems? Those types of challenges. But when law enforcement gets involved with these types of cases, our role is attribution. We look to try and, where possible, put someone behind the keyboard, and using the criminal code charges that we have available to us, lay charges, and put something before the courts. So yeah, there's really no typical day, and I think that's what makes it not only challenging but exciting and fun, and there's never routine, or it doesn't become mundane or anything else like that. And it's definitely an attraction for me. There's no getting bored, for sure.
Right, and no shortage. How many cases would you have open or be working on at any given time on average?
That's a good question. Uh, and it's a tough number to sort of pinpoint, because it kind of goes and comes in waves. Um, I Let me answer the question by simply saying that we're never sitting around waiting. We're never sitting around waiting for the next incident to be reported, or the next occurrence to be filed. Yeah, we're always managing our workload and our caseload as best we can. Obviously, there's a measure of prioritization, like with any other job that would require us to do. But yeah, we're never sitting around waiting. There's always a lot of work to be done. And again, part of our job too is to support the field. So if something comes in where, okay, yeah, this looks good, but you know what? I think if I can provide this direction to the investigator in the field, then he or she can continue to move it forward. It's the whole "don't give someone a fish, teach them how to fish" type of analogy. So that helps us manage the workload, and gives a good balance between the quantity and quality, if I could use that term, of the cases that we actually intake and investigate as a specialized unit. And at the end of the day, what it also does is that it increases the skill level that's out in the field, because the more we can push the knowledge downstream and bring the field investigators up to speed, the better we are off as an agency. But also, the public that we serve is also better off as well. In fact, when we started the unit about 6 years ago, David, one of the things that we took the time to do is that we went citywide, and we did training sessions for all the uniformed officers. So we introduced ourselves, we introduced the team, we explained our mission and our mandate, and we said, basically, these are some of the things that you are likely to see, and when you see them, here's what to do, and here's how we can help. We're also part of recruit training now as well. So when the new recruits come in, and this is something I certainly didn't have 15 years ago, because there was no cyber unit, and it wasn't the major issue that it is now. We're involved with, and not just us, but several units, we're involved with the training of the recruits, so that they actually know, okay, I'm going to get out there, and when I see these types of incidences, this is the information I need to gather up front quickly and get it in the report. And that creates a higher quality product that gets, moved down the chain towards an investigation.
Now, you mentioned earlier on coordinating with a provincial unit. Are there a lot of similar cybercrime units in other jurisdictions, either provincially, regionally, or federally?
Yeah, well, today there certainly are a lot more than they were, even 2 years ago, even 2 or 3 years ago. From a municipal standpoint, Toronto Police is pretty established and pretty large. So by that I mean, from a Canadian municipality standpoint, we're the largest municipal police agency in Canada. We have one of the oldest and most mature cyber units, albeit we've only been around for 6 or 7 years. But for example, my colleagues in Peel region, they just spun up their cyber unit about a year and a half ago. So that would give some perspective. Toronto Police is also the oldest municipal agency in all of North America, which is probably not a well-known fun fact. I think we're established somewhere around 1830, which makes us the oldest municipal agency in all of North America. And in terms of North American size, we're about fifth largest, falling behind the likes of New York, LA, Philadelphia, a couple of others, and we're about the same size on a U.S. comparison with Houston, the Houston Police Department, Houston, Texas. But in terms of our our presence as a cyber agency within a municipal service, you know, within our province, we're the municipal agency. The Ontario Provincial Police is the provincial agency, and of course the RCMP is the national agency. Um, uh, OPP have a very good cyber unit. They're established, they're mature. Same with the RCMP. The interesting thing is that with the RCMP in certain parts of Canada where there is no local police, there is no municipal police, they become the local police. So, depending on where you are, it could be a member of the RCMP showing up on horseback or on a skidoo, to take your report, who may not know anything about cybercrime. As a best practice, the usual reporting mechanism would be report to local law enforcement first, but a big part of that is also understanding. As an individual, it's a little bit more simple. I'll pick up the phone and I'll call the non-emergency number to my local agency and say, look, this happened. From a corporate perspective, whether you're in the public sector or the private sector, it's really understanding the corporate footprint. Generally, what happens with cybercrime is that jurisdiction defaults to the jurisdiction of the victim. Because the suspect could be anywhere in the world. The data could actually be anywhere in the world, considering cloud services. So what agency sort of takes the lead? Well, it's going to be the agency within the jurisdiction of the victim. And then understanding that, well, okay, we have an office in Toronto. The data is somewhere in Europe and the United States, but our head office is actually in Vancouver. Now, who handles that case, right? There's some decisions and conversations to be had there about who may or may not take the lead. When it comes to municipalities are governed by provincial law. So if something happened, let's say in Toronto Police may not necessarily take the lead if it's a municipal entity, because they're governed by provincial law. So OPP, the Ontario Provincial Police, would likely take the lead on that. Regardless, because of the borderless nature of cybercrime, there's really a rare case where you would have the offense, the investigation, some sort of attribution, and prosecution all within the same jurisdiction. It's not like traditional street crime.
Right.
So there's very, very often, and far more often than not, partnerships and joint investigations among multiple agencies.
Right. It's so really important for people to recognize, and as part of their pre-planning in the event that they are a victim of cybercrime, to in advance know who to contact or which jurisdiction might be involved.
100%. The decisions need to be made in advance as part of your incident response plan, and you should tabletop exercise it as well. Know who your local law enforcement agency, or your local agency of record is, how to contact them, and even reach out. Do you have a cyber unit? Who are the leads in the cyber unit? Who are the detectives? And have the conversation. I've had the privilege of talking to several companies who they've not had a breach, but they've either seen a presentation, a seminar, a webinar, and they're starting to put their incident response plan together. And they've reached out, whether it was through email or through a phone call, and said, we're doing this, and we kind of really want to know how do we reach out, and when we do, what are you expecting from us? How can we make things easier and for you in the process? 100% knowing those things is can be super helpful.
No, and that's great. I think it's a great message for everybody to know that you are receptive to those calls in advance, not when the crisis is going on, but to have a conversation and kind of open up channels of communication, so you're ready in case the worst should happen.
Yeah, well, it comes down to what I call the fine motor skills versus gross motor skills, right? So, when police officers go through training, or even military, it's really to prepare them for a critical incident where you're now under stress. You're not necessarily going to think clearly or react properly physically, because there is the stress factor, and your fine motor skills are probably going to be compromised. So you default to your training, you default to your gross motor skills. Now it's the same, the analogy can be carried forward to a cyber incident quite easily, where in the absence of preparedness, um, you know, you lose all that fine dexterity of how your business operates and how your business may respond to different challenges. Now, all of a sudden, no one can access any systems. Your customers can't call. There's been an obvious breach. What do you do? And if you haven't planned and prepared for it, you don't have those corporate gross motor skills, if you will, to fall back on. You don't have that training to fall back on where you can say, oh, okay, we just practiced this 6 months ago. We know what to do. Let's pull the playbook out, notify the customers, notify our staff, statement for the board, contact our regulators, contact our cyber insurance people, call the police. I mean, that's an oversimplification, but in the absence of a plan, people are running around not having a clue of what to do.
Right. And time is of the essence with a cyber incident. So it's super important to have all of that kind of thought through in advance, so you know what to do and execute it.
Yep.
Now, you mentioned earlier on that police services focus on attribution as opposed to blame for or the cause of an incident. I think that's one of the reasons why a lot of individuals or businesses might be reluctant to report cybercrime, is they're afraid of getting blamed for something. Why should they set that aside, and why is it important for businesses to report cybercrime when it happens?
Yeah, I think there has been the misconception, why do I call the police? What are they going to do? And one of the things I've always responded with when asked about our success rate for prosecution with these types of cases, with these types of matters, is, we have zero success with 100% of the cases that are not reported. So
you're paraphrasing Wayne Gretzky there.
Well, yeah, in a way, yeah, right. You can't score the shots you don't take, or something like that. It was loosely, but yeah, it's true. It starts with the reporting, right? So we're not going to really have that success. But the reality is that we still have a way to go. It's a journey in terms of how we're going to involve our investigative capabilities. But the facts are that the units at multiple levels of law enforcement have been established. We work together on the regular basis. The skill sets are there. Could we use more resources? Sure. Could we use more funding? Sure. But show me a business or an organization that can't use those things. So for that as a reason for not reporting is not as relevant as it used to be. But what certainly could be is reputational impact to the organization. And for some companies, that's their currency, is their brand and their reputation. So the perception could be, well, if this gets out, it's going to damage our brand. And we've seen that, people, may not want to report or actually have an investigation ensue because of concerns about their brand reputation. But at the end of the day, that's a business decision, and we can't tell people how to run their business at all. But what we can do is we can align with them, in the event that they do, file a criminal complaint, and do the best that we can in our role as public servants to achieve some sort of favorable resolution for the victim. It's no different than if a vehicle gets broken into or stolen, or if there's someone gets robbed leaving the train going to the parking lot one night after work. If it's reported to law enforcement, which it should be no different if someone breaks into your data center and corrupts all your data, and now they're holding it ransom, and now they're doing this, and it's still crime. I think the part of cybercrime that often goes missing or doesn't get enough attention is the crime in cybercrime. It's a crime. There's criminality that's happening here. Um, so yeah, there's reasons that they don't report, but I believe that there's more reasons to report than not. At the end of the day, it's still a business decision. Not every report is going to result in a criminal investigation. Not every criminal investigation is going to result in an arrest and some sort of conviction, or even restitution of losses to the victim. But we have to remain vigilant, and we have to be persistent and examine everything on a case by case basis, and where the merit is there, and everything aligns, then we can have an arguable measure of success. But it does start with someone saying, hey, I've been a victim of this, and I'm reporting this.
Now, when an individual or an organization makes a report, um, is there, say, an online forum or some kind of resource that people can refer to help kind of organize their thoughts or anticipate the questions they're going to be asked? And that would be part of the pre-planning for an emergency response.
Yeah, I mean that's a huge question. I think a great resource in general would be the public-facing websites of just about any police agency. Toronto Police website, OPP's website, RCMP's website. Another great resource is the Canadian Anti-Fraud Center. They provide a tremendous amount of information. They've been doing a lot of really great work lately because of the massive increase in fraud because of COVID-19. Great information on their website. They've been tracking, I think, losses through fraud in relation to COVID-19, and that information is publicly available on their website. I think Canadians have been victimized somewhere around $7 million. But we also need to factor in the non-reporting factor, which is about 10% generally. So that would probably put that $7 million closer to $70 million.
So only about 10% of incidents are reported?
It depends on what statistic you read and also believe. But we know that not every piece of criminality that happens out there gets reported to us. And we've just had the conversations about why people don't report. And there are various reasons. In financial losses that are covered by banks, and there's restitution to the victim, and the charges are removed to their accounts. They haven't really experienced anything other than some inconvenience. They may not report it to a loss, yet criminality did take place. So not everything's going to get reported. Statistics, depending on where you go, say it's really only around maybe 10-15% of these things get reported. And there are various reasons for why they don't.
So when an incident is reported, what kind of interplay do you reported and investigated? What kind of interplay do you see between the victim service providers like ISA and police services?
Well, generally, so you mentioned an organization. So generally, from an organization victim perspective, what happens a lot is that we know whether they have an incident response plan or not, the remediation factor really kicks in. Okay, somehow someone got into our system. How did they get in? Are they still here? How can we fix this to make sure they don't get in again? Right? So a lot of work that either happens with that organization's internal information technology team and or some sort of outsourced cybersecurity organization. And they go through all the artifacts, whether it's, logs on a firewall or an intrusion detection system, access control. Maybe, they would look at things in their Office 365 platform. They would look at artifacts in an Active Directory. They would look at all sorts of different technical pieces of artifact. When law enforcement gets involved, the reality is that all of those things that are being looked at are things that we need to see too, but we look at it as evidence from an attribution perspective. So we look at those breadcrumbs to try to follow a trail to see not necessarily only how they got in, but who are they? Where are they coming from? Understanding the general geographic distinctions of criminality, because we do know that there's definite trends in terms of different areas of the world where different things come from, whether it's state sponsored, whether it's fraud related, whether it's extortion related, whether it may be related to some sort of organized crime or terrorist financing. There is a loose geographic correlation to these types of things. We would definitely communicate with our law enforcement partners around the world to see, okay, we're working on this case. We see these indicators of compromise, and what have you seen? Have you seen this? Because just because it's happening to a victim here doesn't mean it's not happening to a victim somewhere across the country or even around the world. So that communication is really key.
So, I mean, we talked about the frequency of reports and the severity of reports that you get. Are we making any progress in the fight against cybercrime? I mean, when we're still hearing about breaches and incidents literally on a daily basis?
Yeah, that's a great question. That's something I've sort of talked about a lot over the last 5 or 6 years, looking at the fact that globally the spend is in the billions of dollars on infrastructure security. Yet we keep hearing about all of these different breaches and these different incidences. And David, I think the reason why this is happening is what's at the root of it all has nothing to do with technology or hardware or software. It has to do with human beings. And if you look at the statistics, you're going to see that a lot of breaches are still taking place through email. So I still think that there's a lack of awareness within organizations. And they're hardening their systems, but they're not hardening their people, and they're not. There's not enough training, and um, there's not necessarily enough of a focus on that type of mindset, because I think it comes down to creating that culture within an organization where um, it's made part of the daily vernacular, and it's not something that's secret squirrel and it's only dealt with by the IT department or some sort of external organization that comes in and does a bunch of work and maybe does some training once a year and does a pen test once a year, and if that's what works for the company, then that's what works for the company. But I think we are making progress. I think that the more that we um, sort of desensitize that topic of cybercrime and cybersecurity, and have organizations, so much of it is top down, have the leadership within organizations really make it part of the culture of the organization. And I had a conversation with a municipality, a small municipality uh, around the greater Toronto area. And one of the things that they do as an organization, as a small municipality, is that they not only train their people in terms of cyber awareness, but they reward them. They reward them as well. So they will conduct different exercises and different tests, and when different individuals or units or subunits or departments do well on these tests, or there's a marked improvement over the previous test that was 3 or 6 months ago, they reward them, and I think there's something to be said for that. I think we're making progress. I think the rate at which we make progress could vastly improve when we start investing more in the people. I mean, you don't have to have an MBA to know that the greatest asset within any organization are its people. So knowing that, invest in the people, help them to, elevate their own personal cyber hygiene outside of work, because they're going to bring those habits to work with them. I mean, nowadays, most people are working from home, but the analogy I think still holds. If I'm really vigilant with my own personal uh, information security and identity protection, then I'm gonna be that same way at work, right? Um, so yeah, I think we're making progress, I think the rate at which we make progress will vastly increase the more we start to do that. And when you think about it too, the risk reward and the cost benefit of doing that, it's massive, because it's really not that expensive compared to spending all this money on physical infrastructure.
It's really no contest. You're right.
You know.
Um, and I hear that you have a personal stake in raising awareness and providing cyber security advocacy. Can you tell us a little bit about a recent venture that you're involved with?
Yeah, so this is something that I kind of has sort of developed organically over the last couple of years, where through the different platforms of engagement, whether it's presenting at a conference, obviously pre-COVID, but virtually now, or commenting or sharing information through different social media channels like Twitter or LinkedIn. um, I started hashtagging my comments and my posts and my articles with a couple of things, hashtag be cyber safe and hashtag Kenrick on cyber, basically saying, okay, this is my opinion on this. So it's Kenrick's opinion on cyber. And then I later shortened it to just K on cyber. And that's sort of taken off over the last, couple of years and become a little bit more noticed, to the point where I've I've recently branded K on Cyber, not as necessarily as a for-profit business, but an initiative. It's what I call the CA2I, which is the Cybercrime Advocacy and Awareness Initiative. And it is branded as K on Cyber, and it's really it's a platform that is a website that will launch very soon, and that will have a lot of information in terms of articles, blogs, web series. There will be a podcast. I have my first half dozen or so ready to go when the site launches. Um, and just a good source of information to answer a lot of mainstream questions. You may be surprised to know how many people have asked me about working from home and what they need to do. Is there anything I need to do different? I'm working at home. My kids are at home taking classes. Is there anything I need to do? Because I'm really, really worried. Just answering simple questions like that. And there's not necessarily a right or wrong answer, and there's no guarantees. If you do these 6 things, that you're gold, you're 100% safe and secure, because when it comes to cyber, nothing is. But I firmly believe, and I've seen the impact of it over the last half a dozen years or so, and more so in the last couple, where when awareness goes up, vulnerability goes down. And making people aware that, certainly when it comes to the cyber attacks that are more of the wide net being cast, if they can do certain things and take certain best practice steps in terms of securing their information, securing their identity, securing their infrastructure at home, at work, they're going to become that much more secure. Like, I mean, an active persistent threat, a targeted attack, that's completely different. There's some different criteria that we need to talk about when it comes to something like that. But in general, the cyber threats are going to flow like water through the path of least resistance. So, trying to make yourself that much more secure, and simple things like changing default passwords, using strong passwords, using the strongest available encryption on a wireless router, and removing the default password that the internet service provider puts on that router when they install it. Simple, basic things, maybe using MAC address filtering. Are any one of these things infallible? No. Are, even the aggregate constellation of all of these things infallible? No. But in their absence, you are that much more vulnerable. So why not just take the time and implement them and do them? We saw recently there was a major compromise to a video platform, a video surveillance company. They were breached, and a lot of surveillance video was leaked. and some very, very sensitive. And that really speaks to, the whole IoT, the whole Internet of Things, where we're all a part of that. As long as we're living in the mainstream and we're not, completely off the grid under a rock somewhere, we're all using the internet, and not just for email and for browsing the web and for, online e-commerce. We have our thermostat in our house, video cameras in our house for home security, our home security system, smart TVs, our toaster, our dishwasher. Who knows? I mean, they're all smart devices nowadays, so many of them. And really, what's being done to compromise those? To make them secure? Are those companies being proactive? Are they being, corporately responsible? So my idea behind, and I'm not saying I'm going to have all the answers and be able to solve all the cyber problems of the world, but I firmly believe that awareness has impact, and increasing it does lower vulnerability. And the whole idea behind K on Cyber is really just to provide opinion, perspective, raise awareness, and inspire some action to go out there and take these steps and become more cyber secure and cyber safe.
It certainly sounds like a terrific project, and the time is right for it. No question. Until the launch of the new site, what's the best way to keep in touch with you? Is social media the best channel, or
Yeah, so
those one of these days?
Yeah, Kenrick Bagnall. You can find me at my first last name at on LinkedIn, on Twitter, and also Instagram as well. All those three channels. Kenrick on Cyber is a Facebook channel to follow some information on. So there's those four, and the website will be kioncyber.com. So you can bookmark it now for when it launches. And I'm super excited for the podcast, because I have some really great guests lined up who are just eager to share some information and best practices and stories and guidance. And one of the things I've been trying to do recently is to push some questions out there, because it's pointless doing this if I'm not addressing some of the needs and some of the concerns of just the general public. And I think there's a lot of really skilled and talented people in the information security and cybersecurity space, but unfortunately there are far more people who are, teachers, doctors, lawyers, working in, blue collar jobs, all sorts of different things, who just don't know what to do. Worse yet, when they may have to, help a family member who's in a vulnerable category, like a small child or a senior. Seniors have been targeted like crazy through this whole COVID thing. It's been horrible, some of the victimization that's taken place. So I'll continue to do my day job and work hard as a sworn officer with an amazing agency. I consider myself pretty lucky. I don't know if there's such a thing as an actual dream job, but this comes pretty close, where I get to work with technology and some smart people for a great organization and advocate for victims. And K on Cyber is an extension of all of that outside of my work, where I can continue to vocalize audibly and electronically some advocacy in that space.
All right. Well, I really look forward to seeing it and complement the fight against cybercrime. So thanks so much for all the information today, and really a great discussion. It was great to meet you and learn a little bit more about what you do and how you do it.
Yeah, I appreciate the invite. It was a privilege, and if there's anything else I can help you guys with, or provide some input on, you know how to reach me. And again, thank you for the opportunity. It's really truly appreciated.
All right. Well, terrific. Thanks, Kenrick. So
All right.
today, and we'll see you next time on Humans of Cyber.